Babooni here with another bootcamp for y'all. Today I'll be tackling one of the most important concepts in redemption for you to understand. Specifically, this concept is about how modifiers and effects interact with each other. And so modifiers are the thing called cannot be interrupted, cannot be prevented, cannot be negated. If a card has one of these on them, that's a modifier. An effect is a card that says interrupt the battle or prevent the next or negate. These are the effects, the interrupting, the preventing, and the negating. And I'm going to walk you through each of these scenarios here. And at the end of this video, you'll have a firm understanding about how these effects and modifiers interact with each other. But first, let's break down this chart and interpret it. So obviously you can't interrupt a card that says cannot be interrupted. Same with you can't prevent a card that can't be prevented. And you can't negate a card that can't be negated. So that makes sense right there, right? Can I interrupt a card that says cannot be prevented? Yes, you can. Can I interrupt a card that says cannot be negated? No, you cannot. That's how you interpret this chart. Let's talk about this negate part briefly. Can I negate a card that says cannot be interrupted? You can only negate it if you activate that negate before the card that says cannot be interrupted. Can I negate a card that says cannot be prevented? You can only do that if the negate is activated after the card that says cannot be prevented. So if you don't know what any of that just meant, let's walk through some scenarios. Let's say I have a priest, Amariah, the high priest, and he says OT clay enhancements used by this card cannot be interrupted. And let's say he's blocked by subjugating Egyptians. And then Amariah plays a card that says discard up to 2 evil characters, and he's going to discard the Egyptians. What's going to happen if the subjugating Egyptians try to interrupt the battle and banish all cards in battle? Well, because Amariah says all these clay enhancements can't be interrupted, this is actually not allowed to happen. So you can't use a card that interrupts the battle or interrupts on things that can't be interrupted. Okay, what about cannot be interrupted versus prevent effects? So let's say we had that same priest going into battle, and he's blocked by a demon that says, prevent the next good enhancement played in battle. What's going to happen if Amariah tries to play this zeal for the Lord? What's going to happen? Well, cannot be interrupted does not help when something is preventing you. So this prevent will happen, and this card will be prevented, and its effect will not take place. Let's take a look at what happens where a cannot be interrupted card happens versus a negate. So here we are, Amariah, the high priest. He's blocked by King of Tyrus, which is applying a negate to enhancements and characters. What's going to happen if Amariah tries to play Zeal for the Lord? Well, this negate effect, since it happened before this card got played, it's going to negate and prevent this effect from happening. However, if you do the same scenario and you have Amariah blocked by maybe a black character and you play Zeal for the Lord, putting the black character in special initiative, if the black character tries to play a card that says negate all of their cards in battle after this card is played, it's not going to work. Because the cannot be interrupted means you can't play negates after the cannot be interrupted card has been played. Okay, let's talk about cannot be prevented. So let's say you have an Abraham who is protected from evil OT humans, cannot be prevented. What happens if I interrupt the battle and banish all cards in battle? So normally Abraham would be protected by the subjugating Egyptians, but this interrupt the battle is actually interrupting his protection. Even though it cannot be prevented, it can't be interrupted. So if this were to happen, everybody would be banished in battle. Okay, let's go back to our favorite guy, Amariah the High Priest. What would happen if he got blocked by the Devourer equipped with Wings of Calamity, which prevents the next good enhancement? But then he plays a card that says cannot be prevented if used by a priest. So yeah, cannot be prevented cards cannot be prevented by other cards. So this effect would happen even though Wings of Calamity are trying to prevent it. All right, let's look at some cannot be prevented versus negate that has been activated before. So this is the negate that's happening. Daniel is attacking, he's negating evil characters. And this is a negate that's happening before. Abner, what happens if Abner blocks? If alone, you may choose the OT here to attack cannot be prevented. Will Abner's ability happen even though Daniel is negating evil characters? Well, because this negate is activated before, this cannot be prevented modifier will make sure that Abner's ability actually happens. Nothing that Daniel's doing can prevent Abner from activating his special ability. So what if you used Abner to push out Daniel and opponent brought a new hero into battle and then played a drawn sword which would negate a card of a different alignment and he targeted Abner? What would happen? Well, since this negate was activated after this cannot be prevented ability activated, this effect would work and Abner would get negated. All right, let's talk about cannot be negated. We have a card here, Job, cannot be negated. Protect this card from discard abilities. Let's say he's blocked by a Haman. What's going to happen if you bash a cannot be negated card against another cannot be negated card? So Heyman's plot says you can banish this card to discard up to 3 characters, cannot be negated if used by Heyman. So we have a cannot be negated ability here and a cannot be negated here. What's going to happen? It might be a little bit confusing, but Job's cannot be negated is going to protect him from the Heyman's plot. His ability cannot be interrupted, prevented, or negated. This cannot be negated part by the Heyman's plot, that's more relevant for cards that are trying to interrupt or trying to prevent this card from happening. And that's not explicitly happening here. There's a protection going on. There's not explicit interrupting, preventing, or negating happening. So Job will survive this Heyman's plot. Okay, what if Heyman gets a little crafty? He sharpens his sword, and he plays a Mask of Arrogance. He interrupts the battle, draw 3 cards, and play the next enhancement. So what if he tries that again? Well, you can't interrupt a card that says cannot be negated. And so even though he's trying to interrupt the battle, he's trying to interrupt this protection to get rid of him. That's still not going to kill Job. Okay, Job is back in battle. This time he's blocked by a card that's preventing the next good enhancement played in battle. If Job plays a card that says cannot be negated on it, what's going to happen? Well, the cannot be negated card cannot be prevented, cannot be interrupted, cannot be negated. So this effect is going to happen even though the opponent is preventing the next. And let's say you had your Job and you played this card again, it cannot be negated. If the opponent had a card that they played after that said negate all their cards in battle, that obviously that negate would not happen, and this effect would still happen. The last thing I want to talk about is the question, can I negate modifiers? So what do I need by that? This guy has a modifier. OT clay enhancements used by this card cannot be interrupted. This card is applying modifiers to other cards. So can I use a card that says negate a good card to negate this guy's ability to apply modifiers to cards? Modifiers are special in the sense they can't be negated. They can't be like targeted. So you cannot use a negate to stop cards from applying modifiers to other cards. So that's super relevant, and I hope that makes sense. I'll be leaving a PDF so you can download this and reference this during your games. And if there's still anything you need questions on, ask in the comments.